Hello and welcome to our Super Bowl extravaganza. This is a heck of a show. And for the second year in a row, we have put together a mega show with a plethora of guests who have joined us to break down the game, to share their thoughts, their comments, their feelings with regards to this game, the season. So much great stories and content, and I appreciate all the people that have got involved as part of this project to put together an amazing show. So sit back, relax. This is a long one, but it's well worth it. Enjoy the amazing commentary of Coach Reinbold and Nat Coombs and many other guests that have got involved and joined in. So without further ado, we're going to start conversation between myself and Lee. We're going to bring you a review of the 2021 NFL season. With me for this segment, a 5-yard OG Dolphins fan. He's repping his colours because one day the Dolphins will make the Super Bowl. It's not this year. It's probably not going to be next year. And it's probably not going to be the year after that. But at some point, the Dolphins will make the Super Bowl. And Lee is going to be representing then. So how you doing, my man? You all good?
Yeah, doing really well. Hey, it's great to be back on with you, that's for sure. It's been a while, man.
It's been a while. I know. We've been chopping and changing, turning out a lot of content. But we're gonna have this OG style prep for the Super Bowl. And I thought for this segment of the show, we've gone through, and someone asked me the other day, when it comes to the 2021 season, because a lot has happened this season be remembered for in the books. And I was thinking, as a couple of good games, the playoffs have been really good, but the early windows in games all week in all the weeks have been pretty poor. And it's been is there any real meat on it? Like when you go back and look at what's happened, and I really think it'll be remembered for two things. One, COVID, and just the second year of COVID and some of the interruptions and the changes of rules. But that's been done and done. We don't need to talk about it. But the other is the amount of controversies that have happened this season. And I've been watching this for a long time. You have as well. We both have been watching this for a number. I can't remember a year where there's been this many serious, and I mean really serious. You've always had the odd one. Yeah. There's always been a weird firing or a weird player incident, and we've had, some really horrible player incidents that have happened over the years. But I can't remember this huge volume involving not just players, but coaches, players, owners, entire franchises. The NFL itself, I mean, that's what, for me, I think it'd be remembered for. So I want to go through some of these controversies because I want to if nothing else, I just want to document this, because when I play this back to my kid in 20 years and he says, what was that year about? I was like, well, don't worry, son, I recorded it for you. And it was a lot. I didn't really know where to start. So I'm kind of going to move the order a little bit because let's start with the Washington football team.
Let's do that.
We'll start with it because I'm going to try and do this in chronological order. So in the summer, before the season started, the Washington football team, there was an investigation into behaviors and practices that had occurred there involving misconduct, inappropriate sexual conduct and behaviors, sexual harassment claims, and everything that had kind of occurred there. And then it resulted in Dan Snyder not being the head of the team anymore, but instead now his wife was head of the team. And it kind of got swept under the rug, this whole thing. Like, in terms of for you, because obviously I know with the Dolphins, obviously you've had that change of ownership and you've had an owner that is polarizing. Some really like Stephen Ross, some really don't. When it comes to the Washington football team, or the Washington Commanders, as we should now call them, I suppose, but at the time, they were the Washington football team. just that whole process was weird. It just was done in the summer. It was just like, oh, nothing happens. Oh, okay. So now Dan Snyder doesn't control the team. His wife does, but he still kind of owns the team. It's bizarre, right?
The NFL has a wonderful way of, if they can't outright just completely move it outside of the NFL sphere, like with some of the player incidents that we'll get onto, those players get cut, they go into legal situations, but they're away from the league, so we can kind of pretend that hasn't happened, or we were nothing to do with it. With stuff like this, they're very good at just kind of like, we'll just kind of put that on the back burner, let it fade into the distance, because I don't want to get off the Washington football team or Dan Snyder, but in regards to the Dolphins and what's happened this week, like, everyone's up in arms as it happens. Oh, he's going to have to sell the team. No, if you look back at the history of the NFL, there is a good chance that these things kind of drift off into the distance. Something will happen, and they'll just move on. Like, there'll be a Super Bowl next week, and a lot of stuff will get moved on. And that kind of happened in the summer. Like you say, nothing really came of it. Like a change of who controls the team. I don't want to say, is that a token gesture? Is that do we really believe that's actually made a difference, or has made a fundamental difference to the way the team is run? But more importantly, what's the punishment for this incredibly bad behavior? I think that makes it sound like a child, but you know what I mean.
No. I think there was a fine in there, and then they had to open their books and everything. But yeah, there wasn't a great deal. And listen, you have to look at, is, as you say, the NFL is 32 of the richest people in the world who own teams, and at the end of the day, those 32 owners own the league. They pay the commissioners' wages. They pay for everything that happens. The only time you're going to get an owner go is what happened in Carolina, where you have an owner that's so bad, so deep-rooted and corrupt in so many different ways and levels, on a criminal level and on a personal level, that it has to be done. We have some people that are very morally questionable people running these teams. We look at Stan Kroenke. In fact, this is something we haven't even put in the sheet, but let's touch it. With Stan Kroenke, moved the St. Louis Rams to LA, and he loses the court case, and he has to pay out $790 million to the people of St. Louis. And then he turned around to hush hush and get this all done, told all the other owners he would indemnify them and say, well, I will cover all the costs of the settlement and the legal fees up to the point if we're found guilty of this. Now, by his verbal commitment or written agreement, I don't know what agreement was, he's on the hook for $790 million plus whatever fees were due on that. And then the day after the judgment, he's trying to get out of it, saying, no, I didn't, no. And that's the kind of people we're dealing with. And I think with Dan Snyder, what we know with Dan Snyder is he just doesn't care. He doesn't care what people think. He doesn't have to care what people think. When you won't have that much money, we've got ownership there. And to be perfectly honest with you, he would have got away with it completely. Like, this would not have been a thing had it just ended in July. Like, he just ends up.
I was really hoping you were going to say if it wasn't for those meddling kids. But go on, continue.
But he was going to, obviously, they got, I wouldn't say they got away with it, because they really, hopefully the culture changes. I know with Ron Rivera there, that culture will change. He has a lot more power and influence, and he will stamp out that kind of behavior. And all reports say that behavior has changed. These were historical claims, etc. Yeah. And then it all dies off. And then John Gruden, then the emails with John Gruden, he emails people in the Washington football team, Washington Commanders organization. And these emails come out basically a few games into the season. And, the Raiders are rolling at this point. They've won some games. Yeah. They're on a roll. And then all of a sudden, these emails, and these are emails when John Gruden didn't work at the Raiders. They came out where he wrote them when he was an analyst for ESPN. So he wasn't actually part of the NFL at that time. And he wrote some pretty horrible things about DeMaurice Smith, who was the head of the NFL MPA. PA, and And then he said some things about Roger Goodell. I'm not going to repeat them for the sake of this. Feel free to go and look them up. Obviously, very questionable. For me, this was strange because you got one set of emails get leaked, and it happened to be when the Royster's election to be the new, or to basically to keep his job as the head of the NFL's Player Association rep. And it looked like he wasn't actually going to win. He wasn't going to get enough votes. And then these emails get leaked by somebody. We don't know who. Conjecture would suggest it was someone in the NFL office who would have done this, but we don't know for sure. And then all of a sudden, he gets enough votes to win because he's given the benefit of, you've had to be dealing with this and all this language. Fine, we'll give you another sort of 4 or 5 years. And then Gruden stands defiant. He said, I'm not leaving my job, whatever. And then more emails get leaked on Sunday Night Football, and then he leaves. During Monday Night Football, he resigns. And then afterwards decides to sue the NFL because he believes the NFL have done this to get him out of a job. And what's bizarre is because of the fact it involved the Washington football team and he was communicating with Bruce Allen and executives there in Washington, everyone went, oh yeah, what actually happened with the Washington team? And all of a sudden, all that was, under the rug. And it was like, yeah. We've hidden it away. Someone's just pulled a little thread, and all of a sudden,
just look underneath and see it's still there.
I was like, oh my word. And now there's congressional hearings, there's an investigation into what has happened, why the results and the judgments were the way they were, what did the NFL know? And it's kind of all come full circle. It's just a bizarre situation. And Gruden's done in the NFL. He's never going to come back. And I don't think it's a loss. I mean, it's a loss of a personality, but it's not a loss. I mean, what he said was deplorable, and he doesn't deserve a job. But also, he's revered as this amazing, innovative coach, and what he isn't is an innovative coach.
Yeah,
he's a pretty average coach whose Super Bowl win came because the other team ran his playbook. But I mean, for you, the whole Gruden thing and the NFL and what they did to the Raiders, I mean, what are your general feelings and takes about how that kind of all went down? Because it was just bizarre. It just all happened so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it plays into the fact that the NFL are great at manipulating situations to try and to benefit and protect themselves. And I'll be honest, like you said, you've got 32 billionaires owning football teams. Are we surprised that billionaires are somewhat morally ambiguous at times? This is not, it's not a surprise. They're used to getting their own way. They're used to getting what they want and operating in a kind of in a smaller circle, in a different world to me and you. Do you know what I mean? For John Gruden can sue all he wants. If you wrote the emails, you were in the wrong. There's no, it's a very, the fact that it got leaked is bad, but you also you should never have written them. You can't defend that. So, and it's always, it seems like if there's enough finger pointing, then we'll forget what's actually going on and just kind of move on. Just buy time until something worse happens, whether it's something globally that just takes people's focus or whatever. But it always seems to be, we just kind of ride it out.
I think my only issue is I would like to know who leaked them. Not so much because I care about John Gruden winning his case and getting his money back. Whatever. I don't know. John Gruden is John Gruden. He doesn't deserve, as you say, what he did was deplorable. He doesn't deserve his job. There is a small smidge of me that is sympathetic towards him only because he was targeted for a hatchet job. Someone had these emails for years. They were found as part of the NFL's investigation into the Washington football team. So the NFL knew, Roger Goodell knew, everyone involved in that organization knew that these emails existed. And it posed to me two questions. One, if you were so anti it, like the NFL were, if they leaked it, why didn't they leak them or publicize it sooner or put pressure on Al Davis to say, you need to get everybody in line. This is what we know. This is what we have. We will go public with it, but basically John needs to go, which is fine. I think whatever, it is what it is. Like, if you need him to go because you don't want those morals and ethical standards and you're risking a leak, then fair enough. I don't have a problem doing it all on the quiet as long as the result's the same. And then the second thing is, I highly doubt that in all of the information they got off the Washington football team's servers, that John Gruden is the only one that ever wrote anything that was inappropriate. No. So my question is, one, why was it released when it was released? Well, obviously the DeMaurice Smith aspect of it highly charges it and makes it a thing. So then my next thing is, well, then who leaked it? Because if it's the NFL, if I was the Raiders right now, and I could prove that the NFL leaked these, I would sue the NFL because they were put at a significant disadvantage from a competition perspective. You know, if you had a problem with this, you sat on this information for 18 months, 2 years, however long you had this information, and then you chose a vehicle mid-season to deploy this. That doesn't sit, like that doesn't work. And then now this is why the Washington thing is all stirred up, because what else are people covering up? Because obviously you had these emails from Gruden. What else is in there that people are hiding? Yeah. So, you know, I think for the Raiders, they were the victims of this this whole thing. You know, if you look at the price paid from the Washington football team debacle and investigation, the Raiders have paid a much bigger price than the Washington football team. And the guy who was responsible was not part of the Raiders organization when it happened.
It does seem like the NFL does like to play God a little bit when it's unnecessary. Like even if you'd found those, like you say, that could have been dealt with at the time. It could have been dealt with in the off season. It could have been dealt with any time. But like, you know, if you're a Raiders fan, you'd say, we could have been deep in the playoffs if we hadn't had the upheaval of losing our coach. Like, doesn't, you know, I'm not, again, like you said, I'm not defending John Gruden, but the timing is suspicious. But I do also think the NFL like to do things where it's like, oh, look, we're taking a stand. Look at us and how great we are. Like, we're taking a stand against this guy because he's racist. Yeah, just ignore everything else we're doing.
But all it did was it blew up in their faces, because now all of a sudden you've got the Washington football team investigation, which had gone away. No one was talking about it. No one cared. The league had moved on. Everyone went, well, wait a minute. Whoa. What else is in there? Because now I'm curious. Now I want to know. Now that head coaches are losing their jobs over what is in that stack of documents, how are they getting leaked? Who is leaking them? And what is in there? Because now it's a public interest story. So I feel for the Raiders, and you know, they went through their own trials and tribulations, because not only did they lose John Gruden, but then with the sad news of a couple of weeks later, Henry Ruggs being involved in a high-speed traffic collision, which unfortunately took the life of a young individual. He was over the limit, significantly over the limit, and he was driving that car over 100 miles an hour. He was being charged. My understanding is, I don't think Ruggs was released. Yeah, he was released, wasn't he?
Released, yeah.
So at the end of the day, he was released, and not a lot has been said since. Obviously, he'll go through his own criminal investigation. Because
then it's not our problem. He's released out of the league, and now we can kind of like, hey, look at all the great stuff we do over here. Don't ignore, you know, this. I mean, they look, from the player's point of view, there's no excuse. You get paid too much money to be driving a car under the influence. Just there's no excuse. Sorry, if you'd phoned someone at the Raiders, they would have sorted out getting you home. Like, there's a million things you could have done, and he knows that.
Well, they have cards given to them by people in the facility where they can ring people, and this is, you know, we've seen some incidents already with the Raiders. They lost Damon Arnett from the franchise. His was slightly different. It was boasting and holding guns and threatening violence with firearms, which was just bizarre. and then he went. So he was a former first-round pick. So you had 2 first-round picks in the same draft, or in
Yep.
were both who were both left. Actually, I think they were different drafts because I think Ruggs was part of that. Oh no, they were the same draft. So the 2 first-round picks in the same draft who were basically cut away from the franchise for behavioral issues and for different behavioral issues. But this is, I think, in Vegas, you've got to find a way to police these young men because Henry Ruggs is what, a 23-year-old man. And I'm not saying the Raiders are fully responsible here because they've put safeguards in place against Ruggs, but ultimately they're not enough.
No, I mean, this isn't going to sound fair, but it's my honest opinion. The NFL has partly asked for this. You put a team in Vegas. If you didn't expect bad things to happen, you're insane. And yes, they should know better. But we know how temptation gets to players, especially in off-season stuff like that. We've seen other instances of players getting caught driving too fast and under the influence for the Raiders as well in Vegas. This is not the first time. Certain places just seem to elicit this behavior from people, and they wanted to get a team in Vegas. Well, you have to accept that the temptations are there. Like it doesn't get called Sin City for no reason. People have this. It's completely wrong, but people have this kind of feeling that it's okay to do what I want in Vegas because it's Vegas, baby. That's not the way it is.
No, the tagline is "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." And
it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that bad stuff will happen. And I know that's not a good enough reason, but for me, that's kind of stuff that you expect when you move a team to Vegas. It is. I worry about players when they come to Miami for the same reasons. There's plenty of places to party. Do you know what I mean? There's plenty of easy ways to get in a lot of trouble.
There's a few places, you talk about the Jets and the Giants, they're right on the border of Atlantic City. They're in Jersey. That's not too difficult. You've got some places where there are some lights. There are some places where people can get into trouble. And then you've got other places like Green Bay, Wisconsin, where absolutely nothing happens. And it's one of those things. I think, as you say, you've got to expect it, but you've got to manage it in a way. And I think the NFL has, with the Ruggs situation, it has highlighted the severe weakness that when you're going to put 21, 22, 23-year-olds fresh out of college with no, their only responsibility is their job. And that
which only happens for a small part of the year.
Exactly that. And even in season, if you got a home game or a bye week, you got a lot of downtime as a professional. And I think things have to be done to ensure that these sorts of things don't happen. But, unfortunately, someone lost their life. Henry Ruggs will more than likely go to jail for what he did. I thought Derek Carr was brilliant in this, where he wasn't defending the actions of Henry Ruggs, but he was trying to say, he's a teammate or was a teammate, and he's a friend, and he's someone, and he's a person who's made a mistake.
Any of us could make the same mistake. Not trying to pick on him because he plays in the NFL. Like, he's a normal person like me, you, or anyone else, who's listening to this podcast. People make mistakes, and you still have to. It's still a guy he was friends with 24 hours earlier. It doesn't. You don't suddenly go, well, I don't know that guy because he's done something bad. That's not the way it works.
No.
But I thought he said, Derek Carr came out like a true leader. He was articulate and got his point across, and was the face of a franchise whilst they were going through some terrible stuff.
It really was. He stepped up, and at the end of the day, it's a tragic thing that happened. But I really hope that lessons get learned from it and steps are taken to ensure that these sorts of things don't happen again. Moving on to another controversy, and I don't think this is one that anyone's going to forget in a hurry, and it's just the absolute calamity of Urban Meyer. And anybody who knows me, now listen, I predicted this to go in flames. I knew it would all end in tears, and I knew it would all end spectacularly. Even I couldn't predict how spectacularly it would collapse for Urban Meyer. Because listen, I've watched Urban Meyer teams for 15 years, maybe close to that, 14, 15 years. I know people who have been in Urban Meyer teams. I know people who have been coached by Urban Meyer, and he's not a good guy. When I say he's not a good guy, and I said this months and months ago, I wasn't saying it because I just didn't like the guy. I'm saying it because I know he's a bad dude. He has a long line. He's got a long history. It's not just one or two incidents. This guy should never have been hired in the NFL. People thought I was crazy for saying that, and then we get the incidents that happen, and there was more than one, which kind of say it all.
I mean, the stuff that you're talking about in the past, they're not minor things.
Absolutely not.
These are major things. This is a guy who shouldn't be employed. But again, for some reason, we have this thing where a little bit of time passes, and you go, "Oh well, he was a great coach in college because he won." So that's like kind of overrides everything else. Like, no, that's not right. Sorry,
he wasn't a great coach. He wasn't a great coach. This is what I don't understand. Right? He was never a good coach. People say, "Well, he won." He was a great recruiter. He recruited brilliant players. He told people and their families what they wanted to hear. That is what he did. He was an excellent person at recruiting. If you could employ him to be a US Army recruiter, you'd have a whole ton of recruits. Like, this man is probably the best recruiter, other than maybe like Nick Saban, in college football history. He was able to get people, 5-star recruits, decommit from schools to go to his schools. And he was able to get the best of the best year after year. I mean, he always had top 2, top 3 ranked recruitment classes. But this man in college, there's a long line of things. We're going to stick to what is in the public record, which is his coaches beat up players in a racially motivated incident at Florida. His Florida teams had the most arrested players in the country, not to mention that he bribed all of the county police. If his players were called, here's some money, please don't press charges unless you absolutely have to. Give me a call and I will square it. So you're not just talking about he had the highest arrest records of his players, but how many more
he had that whilst bribing them?
Exactly, and he was bribing them. So how many more were let off because of the fact that he was paying police officers for the small nickel and dime bar fights? The stuff that isn't, it's criminal damage or whatever, and it's criminal offense, but they're the smaller, petty kind of, you go to court, you pay a fine kind of stuff.
But it's the sort of behavior that tells you I can get away with this, and that's exactly what escalates to the big stuff and the stuff that there's no coming back from.
Yeah. I mean, you had Nick Bosa. So Nick Bosa, you're talking about one of the great recruits in recent draft classes. He sat out. He refused to train at the Ohio State facility when he sat out. He refused to go and do his draft prep there because he absolutely wanted nothing to do with Urban Meyer and his coaching staff. I mean, that tells you everything. A guy of Nick Bosa went 2 overall in the draft. You're talking about someone who just went, no, thanks. Wash my hands. Urban Meyer knew that his assistant coach was physically abusing his wife. Him and his wife knew about it. Him and his wife did not come forward and forward this information. Then it was leaked via a text message because they'd had a text message conversation. That conversation went out. That's why Urban Meyer, in his final season at Ohio State, got a 4-game ban, and then he didn't return due to health reasons, the old stress health reasons that he left Florida because I get these headaches and these things and I can't. No, listen, he might have some of that. I'm not going to say he's a pathological liar here, but 2 and 2 doesn't make 4 in this instance. So all this happened before he comes to the NFL. Anyway, he comes to the NFL. First thing he does is he hires somebody with a pretty deplorable past, with racist activity and behavior, a tight ends coach. So within 2 days of hiring someone, he has to dismiss them, and it's one of his first hires as part of the franchise. And by then, red flags should be ringing, but hey, they don't. And then he gets to week 4, and he jumps on. He goes back to Ohio. They play Cincinnati. They lose. And then he decides to stay behind. So he doesn't get on the team plane. He says, well, I'm from here. I'm going to have a night out here. And he gets pictured with a lady dancing on his lap. Now, he is a married individual, as I've mentioned. But the art comes out the next day, and it's not a good look.
It's not a good look. I mean, I'm not an NFL player. I've never played for American football. That's like, I'm going to be upfront with that. But if I was a part of any team where the manager, the head coach decided to just leave you to go home on your own, like, no, sorry, mate, that just ain't. That's not it, chief. Like,
it's one of those things, right? Had they won the game, or if they were winning, and he'd been there a long time, let's say he'd been the coach for 15 years. Let's say we're talking about Mike Tomlin, right? Mike Tomlin, he's been with the Steelers forever. He's won Super Bowls. You know, if Mike Tomlin did that, and he didn't get caught, maybe pictures, but if he decided I'm going to stay somewhere for a night, I wouldn't question it, because you know what? He's bought the currency to do it.
Exactly.
Urban Meyer was 4 games into his tenure. His team were 0-4. They had a historical losing culture, and there's things like that, you know, for me, should be fired there. Like, your priorities are not straight here. They're not straight. You have to turn the culture around, and he lost the locker room with that incident. He absolutely lost it.
But I suppose, as you pointed out earlier, he did also get onto the Jags all-time winning list as a coach. So, like, maybe he knew what he was doing.
I mean, he is got the 5th most amount of wins in the Jags franchise history.
Unfortunately, it probably tells you more about poor decision making at a higher level than just him. But like,
I mean, it's shocking. But he survives. You know, he survives. Then they get a win in London. Sorry, Lee.
Yeah, that's fine. It's okay.
You know, you were one of Urban Meyer's 2 NFL victories, and then the story comes out, which, I mean, it has a funny tone to it, but it's absolutely not funny. Is a story comes out from The Athletic. It comes out from Rick Stroud, actually, who covers the Tampa Bay Times. Is actually someone who I know. And he tells the story that Josh Lambo, who was cut in the preseason, was kicked and ridiculed by Urban Meyer. So Urban Meyer literally kicked the kicker, and he was dismissed not long after that. I don't think it was a shock. He was going to go at the end of the season, I think, anyway. I think Shad Khan had made it clear this was not the guy. Trevor Lawrence looked poor, I think is fair, and I don't blame Trevor Lawrence, but I don't think he was coached. But yeah, kicking a kicker, like literally just kicking anybody and belittling him in it's just the behavior of the man, to think that this is a guy who's won 1 NFL, in fact at that point won nothing. He'd done nothing in the NFL, literally not a thing, and he has the audacity to go up to a professional NFL player and ridicule him, mock him, talk to him like an absolute piece of shit, and then kick him, physically kick him, to where Josh Lambo said, listen, it wasn't like a 10, but it hurt a bit. I mean, that's outrageous.
Let's get clear, right? You shouldn't be kicking anybody, regardless of who you are.
No.
You shouldn't be kicking people. That's just like basic human decency. You don't kick other people, like.
And it shines the light that if he did this in his first season, in fact, first off season, he hadn't even coached an NFL game. He did this to kids. He did this to bare adults, just barely adults. First time away from home. Absolutely. No doubt in my mind he did this in college. I mean, just a despicable human being. And he's gone from the NFL now. But we had that incident, and then, as always, you can't have controversy in the NFL without Antonio Brown. And Antonio Brown seemed to have a very good 2020. Yes, he had to serve 8 games for some misdemeanors and things that he settled. He comes onto the Buccaneers roster, and he literally is a model citizen. Model citizen, does nothing wrong, wins a ring. Then we get 2 incidents with AB. The first, again broken by my good friend Rick Stroud, is that him and Mike Edwards fake vaccination cards. So they say they were vaccinated when they weren't. Now, the Buccaneers' story on this was, well, we believe he was vaccinated. And I truly believe at some point he was vaccinated. I think there was a time pre-season when they submitted and bought these cards. And this all came out because he didn't pay his chef. He didn't pay his chef 10 grand.
You got to pay the right people, man.
Got to pay the man that feeds you. Listen, that's the first person you pay, because that's the one with the axe to grind. Didn't pay a chef 10 grand, and this chef tried to get the money out. Didn't happen. He went, well, do you know what? I'm going to bury you. This story comes out that he's done the vaccination cards. Him and Mike Edwards get a 3-game suspension, but the full belief was there was a period where they got these vaccination cards to avoid getting vaccinated, so that they didn't have to adhere to the protocols of the unvaccinated in the NFL. But at some point, they then got vaccinated, but then didn't tell anybody, because obviously they'd submitted the vaccination.
We've now gone too far, so now we can't go back and tell you that we'd lied in the first place.
Correct. So, I mean, and that's just, and then we get what happened in week 17, which I'm not convinced we'll ever see this again, where he is complaining that he is not getting the ball enough to get his performance incentives, which, given the fact that he, because of his vaccination debacle, he'd been fined 800 grand in wages. So these incentives were going to total and basically pay for the fine that he's had to pay, and a little bit more. And he was obviously itching and scratching for this money. And then basically was asked to enter a game. He didn't. He kicked off. He refused to go into the game. There was a verbal altercation between him and the coaching staff and Bruce Arians, and Bruce Arians fired him in the middle of the game. And he basically took his top off. He said, "I can't play. I'm hurt. I have an ankle injury," whilst running off the field, doing jumping jacks into the crowd. I mean, and then he just leaves. So he just goes. He leaves the stadium. He obviously, this isn't in Tampa. He's in Jersey. So he got there on the team bus and the team plane. He didn't come back on the team plane. So I just think, of all the things I've ever seen in the NFL, this might be the most bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's not a surprise solely because he got the ring the year before, and that was the incentive to behave. And once that happened, you knew, little angel, little devil on his shoulder. You knew the devil was getting bigger, because unfortunately, it's part of his character. And it's a shame because it takes away from what is a terrific NFL player.
Oh yeah.
But let's be honest, the guy is a special player, but he's going to be remembered for the crap. He's going to be remembered for the nonsense stuff, which is a real shame. But I think it's one of those ironies where getting the ring was the worst thing, because it kind of, I think that was the incentive to behave. I've watched some of his interviews since, and it's a lot of rambling.
Makes no sense. He basically then throws Tom Brady under the bus, who was the person who defended him and basically reignited his NFL career. And he said, "Oh, he can't do anything without me," and all this. And I just, he's an individual now who's burned his career, and people saying, "Oh, well, someone's going to take a chance on him." I just don't think they will. I just don't think anyone will. If you're going to walk out on a playoff team, because by week 17, the Buccaneers had secured their playoff spot, so you knew they were going into the playoffs, and you're sitting there thinking, like, it's the NFC. If you can get through the Rams and the Packers, you probably got a good shot. And like,
they were a Super Bowl contender for, that's defending champs, and they'd already made the playoffs. Like, you're a contender. That's the way it is.
I mean,
but
it's a crazy thing.
If someone is stupid enough to give him a chance, then they deserve exactly what they'll get, which is what the Raiders got, what eventually the Bucs. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know,
and the other year, that probably would be the one memorable moment of the entire year because it's memed, it's out there.
Yeah.
That barely scratches the top 5. You know, there's a couple more I'm going to rattle through quickly because they're minor in the grand scheme of things, and we've covered them, and I kind of want to get onto other stuff. The first is Aaron Rodgers faking his vaccination status by telling the media that he was vaccinated. And he used those words. He used the words, "I have been immunized."
Yeah.
Didn't use the words vaccinated. He said, I am immunized, which any person in the world will interpret that he has had the vaccination.
Yeah,
he did not. He believed in a different treatment. He said he was allergic to some of the things in the Johnson & Johnson and some of the other stuff he couldn't have or whatever. Listen, by the by, I don't really care, but he broke COVID protocols rather than getting suspended like other players who faked vaccination cards, and rather than take the heat of people like Kirk Cousins, who were very vocal that they were not going to get vaccinated, he went around without masks, did not follow the rules, and put journalists potentially at risk. And this only came out when he got COVID and realized that actually he had to stay out for 10 days under the old COVID rules that changed. So that was one. The other, the overtime rule came up again in one of the greatest games in the NFL's ever seen, the Chiefs and the Bills. Josh Allen, and we'll get to Josh Allen in a bit, doesn't get the ball back. Chiefs win the game. I mean, that's a debate I think will end this year. I think they will end this debacle and fix the overtime rule. I really hope so. What are your thoughts?
I mean, to be honest, I've hated this overtime rule since it was changed. It doesn't make sense to me. I never really understood when they changed from before where you could go to a double overtime. Like, if that's what it takes to get a winner, like let's do that. That just makes more sense. I think both teams should have the ball. That just makes sense. Like, I don't understand why that's such a big deal.
No.
That, you know, I don't know. It seems like they were trying to fix something and kind of overcorrected in the other direction. But let's hope they see some sense now. But in regards to the game itself, you knew we knew what the overtime rules were going into that game. It's unfortunate, but you had other chances to win the game beforehand. Like that's just the way it is. Like, unfortunately, you just got to suck it up. But let's change it going forward so we don't get it again.
Yeah, not if we're going to have a great spectacle like that. Absolutely.
Exactly.
But yeah, the last one, and this is the controversy that's been coming out in the recent days. This broke just under a week ago, and it's good that you're here because you can help. Is this basically Brian Flores is suing the NFL now? Obviously, at time of recording. We're recording this on Monday night. This hasn't been resolved. I can't imagine this will be resolved before the Super Bowl anyway. It's too complex a matter. This is on the same day that it looks like Lovie Smith is going to get the Houston job, which will turn the black minority coaches from, I think it's 2 to 3 in the NFL. There's Ron Rivera. Robert Saleh,
Mike McDaniel.
Offensive coordinator. I'm talking about actual head coaches. Oh yeah, because he's going to be hired.
He has been hired. Yeah.
Okay, so he was
hired. He was hired late last night. He's actually literally just touched down in Miami to
sign the deal
to get everything done.
Okay, so Mike McDaniel. Okay, so we're going to see some more. So it is changing. There's still a couple of jobs out there, but obviously Brian Flores is alleging that there were some processes that were heavily unfair due to race, and he is claiming that's why he lost his job, but also that he was not given a fair interview treatment at the Broncos and at the Giants. Now, you're more to this because this is your coach, this is your guy than I am. So what is the fundamentals of his case? And more importantly, do you think he has a chance of being successful?
It's really complex. Like I'm not going to pretend to be
No.
a legal mind, but the crux of it is he doesn't believe that he was given a fair interview by the Broncos before he got the Dolphins job, and he doesn't believe that the interview process was correct in New York with the Giants before not getting the job in the last 10 days or so whenever Brian Daboll was announced as a coach there, based on messages he received by accident from Bill Belichick, which is a bizarre situation in itself. Now, the Dolphins stuff is really interesting because it kind of sits in this weird space where he's not exactly alleging that he was let go based on a racial reason, but kind of tying it in, because what he's alleging Miami have done is try to bribe him to lose games. But I don't believe that he's actually stating that that was based on his race. But he's saying that it's, that's not right. You shouldn't be bribing a coach to lose games. So I think there's some really tricky issues. I think I saw his interview the other day on CBS. I mean, he says that he tried to come out a week before to the news, and they weren't interested. After the papers were officially filed, then of course he was doing the media rounds. Amazing how people take you more seriously once it's out, which is kind of crazy. I mean, I think he's definitely got a point about the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule is a great rule in principle, but it's very, very hard to enforce people to take it seriously. And I can understand how this could happen, and it's wrong, but I can see how it could happen. He's saying that the Giants may have interviewed him to tick a box, and you can see how that happens because the rule's in place. But I can't force a team and ownership to take a candidate seriously of any race or any background. But the rule's got great intentions. I just think it's very hard to actually enforce. And I think he does have a case.
But I think, do we really believe that the Giants have interviewed Brian Flores, who has led the Dolphins to back-to-back winning seasons? Do we really believe that he was there to tick a box? I just don't. I don't buy that. I think there's easier.
We need to go back.
There's easy coaches.
We need to go back a little bit further, right? So about 3 weeks before the end of the season, I was told by someone inside the Dolphins organization, this guy's not long for this job because of the way he treats people inside the organization.
Yeah.
And that two prominent free agents for the Dolphins, maybe not prominent in the grand scheme of the NFL, but big free agents, they said, we will not come back for any money all the time that guy is a head coach because of the way he was treating people. So he was part of the reason he was let go in Miami was solely for the way he treated other people. It's a very bizarre, and that was before he got fired. It'd be easy to say that, trying to defend the Dolphins now. That's not it.
Well, that, and there's a lot of speculation out there in the public domain that the way that he handled the Tua entourage and Tua in particular, that relationship was heavily fractured between coach and quarterback, that the GM basically had to decide, do we go with the quarterback who is under contract and who we've drafted and who we believe can be the franchise quarterback and who had played well in the second half of the season. We can talk about the strength of schedule, and I've ragged on it that they didn't play anyone big, but you have to win those games 2-1.
You still have to win. That's right.
And 2-1 those games. As much as we want to sit here and say that he had an easier schedule, he still won the games. He's proven that he is, at worst, he's a middle of the road quarterback.
He's a capable NFL quarterback.
Yeah, so he's a top 18 quarterback. So you have to say that he is there at the minimum, with the potential under the right system to potentially progress. Now, you have to say, well, we're going to take that guy who we got under contract, who we drafted 5th overall, who we spent this draft capital on, and not just that, but picking Jalen Waddle, who is his wide receiver, and all of these things. Everything is pointed to the franchise have backed Tua, or you have the head coach who, on one side, has led the team to back-to-back winning seasons, did not take them to the playoffs either time, but also has all these other things you mentioned with the free agents, you've mentioned with the quarterback. You can't have both. I think it got to a point where you couldn't have coach and quarterback anymore. The Deshaun Watson, Tua not being a captain, he was the only starting quarterback in the NFL of significance. And I mean of significance because a couple of teams don't have they have a rolling captain. So that goes around, and a couple have people like, rookies who aren't going to be captains. Some of them aren't going to be captains, like Justin Fields, who wasn't the starter, Trey Lance, etc. So, for the most part, he was the recognized starter who was not a captain. That was the list. It was him, which is unusual. So, I think the decision people were really shocked when he went. You weren't shocked. I wasn't overly shocked. I was a bit surprised.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have said it was like the most shocking firing. And I think for me, I think he's standing up for the right reasons. And I think prehistorically,
Definitely,
and maybe currently, there are issues here that need to be drawn.
For sure.
And if he can trailblaze and iron them out, I'm all for it. Do I think
absolutely terrific? If he can do it, like he has to be applauded. But Steve Ross was very, very clear in the post firing interview.
Absolutely.
That the problem was communication, and we'd heard that weeks before. It's got nothing to. It's not to do with him. I mean, this is where the legal thing becomes a little bit muddied, because they were bribing me to try and lose games. Stephen Ross is mad because I won games, but that was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't think he's firing you because he's mad you won games 3 years ago. After that doesn't really make an awful lot of sense to me personally.
No,
I don't know. The whole trying to lose games is a whole nother matter.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they're separate issues, but I can understand why they've been put into one legal case.
I see it as Brian Flores as a man who is trying to throw enough mud so that something sticks. And I think I feel for him in a lot of ways. I do think that there is a case where he has been potentially mistreated. I think that the allegations of tanking is very serious. And I think that should be explored. Do I think that he was fired because he was black? Absolutely not. Do I feel that he was blackballed as a result of that? Absolutely not. He was heavily talked about once fired, that he was a heavy candidate on this coaching carousel. I think if anything, this case is going to make him very difficult to be hired, because he could have been in consideration for the Saints job. He's probably not going to get an interview now with this process going on, because you can't.
And he was a serious consideration for the Texans. He was,
yeah.
And like you say, I think good on him. He's doing what's right for the greater good rather than what's in his personal interest right now.
Yeah, listen, I still think the NFL has a way to go. I look at David Culley as a great example of this. David Culley was hired. I genuinely believe David Culley was hired to tick a box. That I do believe. I believe David Culley was a sitting duck. The new structure with Nick Caserio and everyone came in. They didn't have any players. They had the whole Watson situation. It wasn't an attractive job to go to this year. No one knew what was going on. I know what we're going to do. We're going to hire a competent minority coach to get extra draft picks. That, for me, is one that I would explore 100%, because David Culley was fired this year. What was David Culley supposed to do? For me, overachieved.
I thought he did a great job.
Exactly that. He overachieved. What came out of the Texans this year, with all the mess going on with the Deshaun Watson and everything else? What did David Culley do that warranted him losing his job? Absolutely nothing. And also now we're looking at this is they've hired Lovie Smith. Now, if it was like, we're going to fire you, David Culley, but what we're going to do is we're going to hire someone who is our long-term vision for this franchise. If they'd hired Josh McDaniels, I actually probably wouldn't have blinked. I would have gone, okay, so you've got Josh McDaniels. This was a long-term plan. Poor David Culley. It was a hire and fire job, whatever. But they've scrambled. They fired Culley. They had no plan. They were like, well, we didn't want him anyway, but he was here. He took the job. They've discarded him like a pile of rubbish. And then they've gone and hired Lovie Smith. Now, I've seen Lovie Smith coach a team. He's a nice guy. He's a lovely guy. I love Lovie Smith. Brilliant bloke. Good coach. Is he a generational talent that's going to take your franchise to the top of the mountain? No, because he's never done it.
That's right. Is he much better than what you've just fired? Like, no. David Culley's learning and getting better. Like,
and absolutely crazy. So,
but I do want to touch briefly on the tanking stuff, because I think going back to taking this all the way back to when we started this conversation like 50 minutes ago, this is one of those things that will get swept under the rug, because there's a lot of people out there, especially in the local South Florida media. Well, Stephen Ross is going to have to sell the team if he gets found that this is true. Right now, Brian Flores is saying he tried to pay me to lose games. Well, unless Brian Flores is saying he accepted money, all Stephen Ross did was fail to cheat. And you can't get in trouble for failing to cheat. Wanting to do it is, is bad. It shows a certain lack of morals, and if you go investigating, you're probably going to find something else, because I'm guessing it's not the first time you've tried to do something of questionable morality. But for this in particular, unless you're saying you took the money and tanked, he didn't cheat. And that's how they're going to say there's a Super Bowl next week, then we're going to be into the draft process. This is just going to go quietly away.
Unless you report it at the time, then it's very different, because you're trying to manipulate something that is a current event, i.e. the NFL draft, and then you got a case. If you wait 3 years on it and then say, hey, this happened, now you're in a hearsay. You're now in a he said, she said. Most of the people involved are not privy to that conversation, or have forgotten about it, or have left, or whatever. It's just a mess. And
this is where Brian Flores is going to, I think this could upset the rest of his complaint, is that if you were of high morals, why did you not come out and say it? If the owner tried to force you into a meeting with Tom Brady, which is the other part of this, on his boat when it wasn't allowed, and you say you walked away, why wasn't that reported? You walked away, but you knew it was happening inside your organization, which meant it risked punishment on your team. It's a very difficult situation. Do you know what I mean? But I do believe this is one of those things that the NFL say, well, you didn't actually cheat because he didn't take the money, and you didn't actually lose enough games. So
it is what it is.
And can't really prove it.
No. And this is why this season will be the year of the controversies, because we're 56 minutes in and we've spent 55 minutes talking about all the bad things that happened this year. We've got about 10 minutes left. So let's review some of the positive storylines of the season. And one of the things I thought was positive is we've talked so long about these up-and-coming quarterbacks. And in the playoffs, it's shined through with Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson's won an MVP recently, and Justin Herbert and his great play. And, this is why there's pressure on players like Tua, because he's come out in a similar time of all these generational quarterbacks. And actually, if these were not all knocked around, Tua wouldn't be the target of all these missiles, because there isn't that many good generational talent. And yet, despite all of this, the two guys that are going to battle it out for the MVP this week are 44-year-old Tom Brady, who's just retired, and 38-year-old Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's balmy to think that we've got all this young generational talent, all this amazing youthful talent, and you've got two guys with a combined age of 82 fighting it for the MVP. And
if you want to throw an extra one in there, we could also have a Super Bowl winner in Matt Stafford.
Yeah.
Exactly. I know Joe Burrow's, everyone's excited about that, but you could come out of this very seriously with Matt Stafford as the Super Bowl winner. Like you say, your two MVP candidates, a combined age of 82.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy, and I think that Rodgers will win the MVP. I don't think he deserves it for me, but I am slightly biased, so I can't get away from it. But I do think it's interesting that you have these two players who have continued to play the game at such high levels of excellence that these younger guys still aren't getting a sniff. And it shows to me that the quarterback position, in order to be really successful, you have to have done it quite a while. That's why, maybe we don't give up on someone like Tua, because he is a couple of seasons in. And listen, I've been critical of Tua. And I'll be the first person to say I've been critical, because I don't feel like he has shown that he's a franchise quarterback. But now hearing about the reports and the environment, it's pretty hard to be great if you're in an environment that doesn't foster you a chance to be great, right? And I think that's the difference. Is I think we all expect things, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, so I can say it, that we expect people to be great now. Like, you're drafting them that high, you're paying that draft capital, we expect them to be great. Let's just give them some time and let them be great.
The NFL encourages us to do so, because it lets us see these players get drafted in April and then wait till September to see them play.
Exactly.
You know,
It's
we
just
get
bruised.
excited because there's nothing else going on, and we build ourselves up. And every team in the off season, everyone's fans believes they've got a chance because given enough time, you can talk yourself into it. You know, I can see a path to the Dolphins win the Super Bowl, and I'm sure. And do you know what helps foster this? It's a team like the Bengals making the Super Bowl this year. It just proves that it's possible to go from the middle of the pack or from the lower half of the NFL. Do you know what I mean? It's a quick rise to the Super Bowl, and if they can do it, well, hell, why can't it be the Jets next year? Why can't it be, you know, any team you want to pick? If you're a fan of that team, that's why we get excited, and we put, like you say, we put this pressure on unfairly on players.
Well, let's look at a player who very similar circumstances came out the year before Joe Burrow, and that's Kyla Murray. You know, he takes the Cardinals to this amazing 9-0, 10-0 start. They decide to really back him with some talent. You know, they bring in free agents. You know, you get DeAndre Hopkins, you get AJ Green. You really start to back him in a way that he'd never been backed before. You bring JJ Watt in. You know, this is a franchise that went all in to try and win now, and it worked for half a season, and they were, you know, number one team in power rankings, and very similar to the Steelers last year in the fact that they just were blitzing everybody away, and then all of a sudden they barely scrape in the playoffs, and their decline is just as quick as their rise. And I know Cardinals fans will be screaming at me, it's like, well, Kyler got hurt and Hopkins got hurt, and I think that's maybe half the story, but for me, they were a strange team because for me, they either played well over expectations or I don't know what it was, but it was never sustainable. I never looked at the Cardinals and thought that's a team that's going to win the Super Bowl. I just thought that's a team that is going to get unstuck at some point and fall apart. And it's just a case of when and not if. So do we think Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury are going to figure this out and build a dominating franchise in the NFC? Or do we really think that this is like what we've kind of seen is the best it's going to get?
I don't think both of them see it all the way through, that's for sure.
Okay.
I'll be honest, I always get the impression, and I know it's exciting because the offense can be exciting at times, but I always think Cliff Kingsbury looks out of his depth on the sideline. He looks like a guy who's almost surprised it's going as well as it's going when it's going well. When it's going badly, it's kind of like just kind of like monitor, like, okay, I don't know. They almost expected, like you say, like it's not a surprise that this isn't going as well as we thought. And maybe it's not having enough experience. But let's be honest, if your team is able to play that way enough, you should be able to turn it into a sustainable model. Like you say, they back the quarterback. And I am a fan of that because as a fan of a team who hasn't backed their quarterback, I think you have to, because otherwise you can't get a clear reading. And you know, people were upset when the Packers drafted Jordan Love because Aaron Rodgers needed a wide receiver. Tom Brady needed good players around him. That's not to take anything away from those players, but they need talent around them. Matt Stafford, put him on a team with more talent. Guess what? You get better results. What a surprise. You know, you have to back these players and build around them, the young guys, to help them. I think you've seen two really good examples of how far you can take this. Jamar Chase has been great because you paired him up with a guy he's played with. It can't be underestimated how much of a benefit that is. And exactly the same thing happened with Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle was great this season because he played with a player he knew. It helped him immensely because he can explain things in a way. He knows how to work with Jalen Waddle better. That's it. It's not just the connection on the field. It's the explaining all the other stuff. And I think, hey, you've got to do that. But then your quarterback, then your players have to reward you by actually winning. Like you say, they fell apart at exactly the wrong time. And
yeah, they really did. They really fell apart at a crucial part of the season. It didn't help that Murray missed games. It didn't help that
No, of course.
Hopkins missed games. And, it'll be interesting. I think next year's a really big year for the Cardinals. So I think they have to win that division next year to cement their place. Otherwise, again, I think questions will be asked. One team that did really fall apart again, quite spectacularly, so much so they missed the playoffs, is the Baltimore Ravens. I have more sympathy for them, in the sense of they lost a lot of players. Like, if you're talking about injuries, they lost their entire secondary. They lost their entire, they lost Lamar Jackson. They lost a lot of their receiving core. They lost, parts of their defensive line. They lost parts of their offensive. They were banged up everywhere. I don't even know how they fielded the team some weeks. They were literally so banged up, and they were still in contention for so long.
If you took that injury report, that list of players on IR plus the rest of the players on their injury report, you'd probably win games next year in the NFL with that team.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's a star-studded list, and that is unfortunate. I mean, the interesting one is Lamar Jackson, because obviously, whether we like it or not, quarterback is always going to be polarizing. Missed plenty of games again. Is this another case of a mobile quarterback that's not going to last physically?
It's an
don't know.
One.
I mean, I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but it has to be in your mind, because we've seen it happen too many times in the past, and he's now starting to miss games on a regular basis.
Yeah, there's definitely some question marks around the Bengals next season, but it'd be interesting to see what they do. I don't agree with the firing of Wink Martindale. I thought he's been the best defensive coordinator in the NFL the last 3 seasons, so for me, it was a massive shock. Bengals, their huge resurgence is why we're going to be talking about them all throughout this show. So I'm going to kind of leave that, but it's just amazing. They win their first playoff game since 1991. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and everything they've done. So incredible to see them rise. Obviously, Detroit, they were kind of everybody's. It was strange. Everyone kind of laughed at the Dan Campbell signing, myself included. Everyone kind of thought, this is ridiculous. This guy he's been around the NFL, but come on, he's not held a proper coordinator's job. And yet here he is in Detroit. They get Jared Goff. We all knew it wasn't going to be pretty, but somehow they were the endearing story of the second half of the season with their spirited displays. And they really were an unbelievable team to watch at times, which was unexpected, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
I mean, I'm insulted that he may not have had a coordinator's job, but he was a head coach of the Miami Dolphins very briefly, even if it was interim.
How briefly?
It was very briefly.
It was very 2 games, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But, hey, he won a game. What do you want? I mean, Dan Campbell is the kind of guy that, I mean, if you get a chance to see him when he was on Hard Knocks with the Dolphins and when he was the interim head coach, like, you can see why that's the kind of guy who would make you run through a wall, even if you're getting beat out of sight. Like, he's the kind of guy who's going to get you on side. Like, that is again, he would be a great recruit in the Army. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's that kind of guy. And they say, I think it just gave everyone a soft spot for the Lions. You just hope that their wins didn't come against your team, but you'd like to see them win the other weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he really showed that he got them playing to the best of their ability. It's just a very talent-depleted side, and it's a huge rebuild there. It's going to take a long time, and I hope he gets some time to improve that roster. But they didn't get the 1 pick. That went to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who sensationally beat the Colts in week 17, but to deny them a playoff spot. And then because the Detroit Lions won, the Jags held on to that number 1 pick. So they're picking number 1 again for the 2nd year in a row. We've talked about the downfall of them a little bit. Tiny bit on Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons might have put together the best. I mean, he's just won well, he hasn't won Defensive Rookie of the Year, but I assume he's going to win that award. I think Jamar Chase won Rookie of the Year, actual Rookie of the Year, which I think it would have been close. But Micah Parsons, for me, probably put in the best defensive rookie performance of any player I can recall in the last dozen years, at least. I can't think of a player who's had more impact in the NFL in the last 10 to 12 years as a rookie on defense.
isn't he absolutely? I mean, he's absolutely fabulous to watch as well. Like I find him gripping. It's hard to just watch linebackers play, without focusing on the ball. But you see him go to work, and it's mightily impressive.
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of Lawrence Taylor, just how he dominates and gets up to the line and the way he shifts around, and you just can't do anything with him. He's just an unbelievable talent, and I'm really excited to watch him in the next few years to see what he does. But I wanted to shout out him because he was just at the center of so many things. I mean, this Dallas Cowboys defense was abysmal 12 months ago. It was literally one of the worst defenses I've ever seen in football, and now they were realistically a top 3 defense this year under Dan Quinn, and what they did there. I mean, nothing short of an unbelievable turnaround.
So do we think that Dan Quinn pulled his name from interviews because he thinks he's getting Mike McCarthy's job?
100%.
Because I mean that just makes too much sense. Let's be honest.
It's going to be him or Kellen Moore. It's going to be one of them.
And for all the people that want to talk negatively about the way Jerry Jones, kind of operates, look, he gives everything to that team. If you were a coach of that team, you're not going to want for anything. If you want a player, he's going to make sure it happens. Money is no object, and he's going to do everything he can. So, look, compared to a lot of other jobs in the NFL, if you get the chance of that and you have to wait a year for Mike McCarthy to fall on his face, which he kind of ultimately will, that's a wait worth going through.
Yeah.
It's more appealing than some of those other jobs that are on the market. Like you say, the Jags job right now. You don't get the number 1 over pick 2 years in a row because you're well run.
No. And especially as a defensive coach, I think the Jags job was quite attractive if you're an offensive coach to work with someone like Trevor Lawrence and have that sort of clean slate. But
yeah,
a defensive coach, I think it's very different. It's not as an attractive job. Couple of things very quickly. We'll wrap this up. The rise of the AFC, for me, it's always been that the NFC was the premier division for the last 8-10 years. I think we've really seen this switch now with the elite quarterbacks. They're all. You look at Aaron Rodgers; he could go to Denver and be the 3rd best quarterback in his division, and he could be the 2-time MVP. I mean, the AFC is a tough place to go play right now, and I think we haven't even talked about like Trevor Lawrence or Zach Wilson or any of these other young quarterbacks who can really go. And
there's a lot of potential there as well.
Absolutely. It's strange because you've got players like Baker on his 5th-year option now, Baker Mayfield. He's going to find it very difficult, or 4th year, maybe he's coming into now, 4th year. He is going to find it very difficult now to not just keep his job, but also to get paid because there's so many better quarterbacks in the AFC. He's going to find it a real struggle. So amazing to see the rise of the AFC. I think the AFC is going to dominate for years to come. When you look at the games and the overall talent split, I think you're going to see more teams in the AFC dominate for years than in the NFC.
But that makes sense. Like you say, the NFC's been so strong for so long that means those teams are getting higher picks in the draft. Then that's the sort of natural evolution. It'll be the other way for a little while before the NFC will come back because they're taking all the premium talent in the draft. If they're sensible enough to pick it, see the Jags.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the coaches that left. Talk about John Gruden, Urban Meyer, Mike Zimmer lost his job. Dave Kelly we've mentioned, Joe Judge, Vic Fangio, Matt Nagy, Brian Flores, who talked about at length, and Sean Payton has stepped away. Anyone wants to say retiring, he's not retired. I think that's another name you could throw in the Dallas job, by the way, because I know that he's been linked with that in the past. I mean, that's a lot of coaches. You're talking about 9 coaches left their roles. That's obviously a lot. 8 of them were terminated, 1 left of their own accord. That's a lot of change. I think a lot more than most people were expecting this year.
Yeah, and I think this is hard to say, but there's not a lot of standout games when you look back through the season and say this is a year full of teams playing at their absolute best. So I think the turnover is maybe not as big a surprise as you would think. It just makes it exciting for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there was probably, when we look back at this 14 teams make the playoffs, I thought both 7 picks were as bad as 7th seed teams as could be. Neither of those teams were competitive. Both got blown out. Then you look at, so you eliminate that down to 12. I thought the AFC side, I think you could look at the 12 in the AFC and go, or the 6 in the AFC and go, yeah, they're 6 very good teams. Even the Raiders, with everything they've overcome, maybe you want to cast them off and say there were 5 really good teams and 1 good team in the Raiders. I could get on board with that. But in the NFC, really, you were looking at the winners of the NFC being the Packers, the Bucks, or the Rams. And then for me, there was a tier down to, and that maybe 49ers fans will say, well, that's not fair. We beat the Packers. Yeah, I just think the Packers always built to lose. I just think they lose every year in the playoffs. Like, they're like the Saints. They're kind of, they're good in the regular season, but when it comes to business time, they're not good. They never have been. So yeah, I think, there were, for me, 3 teams, and one of them is the Packers, who I expect to choke. So really, I thought it was only ever going to be the Rams or the Buccaneers that were going to win the NFC. I didn't see another winner there. I really didn't. I didn't think that. I didn't think another team would win the NFC. I thought the winner of that game would be in the Super Bowl, and that's what's happened. I think so. You're looking at maybe 7, 8 teams, 9 teams, maybe max. You'd say we're good.
And even then, I think the AFC teams, I mean, they've really made hard work of it. Let's be honest. Like, that game was hosted in Arrowhead, but that's because the number 1 seed got themselves knocked out. Like, the Bills should have been hosting that, but they went through a rough patch. I mean, they played some bad games in the middle of the season where you're just like scratching your head, like, is this the same team that we saw at the start of the season? I mean, even in a loss to us, they got booed off at halftime because they were awful. They won the game, but when you look at you, like, I said, I got a friend of mine is a Bills fan. I said to him, "You're not going to the Super Bowl because you've just shown that you can get beat." Like, and that's by at the time we'd won 1 game, like, and we were awful. And like, you've made that look way too difficult if you think you're a real Super Bowl team. I think that's kind of how it played out. Buffalo should have been playing that game at home. They didn't. The Chiefs were lucky to be playing at home because the Titans managed to make a mess of it. Like, they came good in the end, and we will remember the 1 game at the end of the season. But they, at different points, like, we got to remember, people were worried about the Chiefs in the first half of the season. Yeah. Like, it wasn't pretty, but they came good at the right time. But yeah, I think this is one of those years where people will look back and say we should have done better.
Yeah, I think there will be a lot of teams that will look back and think they should have done better. The only teams that looked really strong in the regular season were the Packers, who we know, just no disrespect, don't do anything in the postseason. For the Buccaneers, I mean, they lost to the Saints twice. You take them out, and they lost 2 games. And you can sit there and say that they had their challenges and injuries, but they still put up good scores most weeks. The Rams look good through the season. I don't think anyone's overly shocked that they're there now. They probably would have been shocked at the start of the season with Matt Stafford would he last, but I think if you look at it, I think for me the Rams through the season, I would argue, were probably the best team to this point. I think the Bengals couldn't string wins together, but in the playoffs they've been on this run since week 17, beat the Chiefs. They absolutely deserve to be where they are. But I wouldn't say that they've had this most unbelievable season. They're similar to the Bucs, really. Their season is so parallel to the Buccaneers season last season, when they had some high points, some low points, couldn't string it together. Then went on a run, confidence went high, and then they blew everyone away on the road, and then and did a job. Sure. So I think that's how I can parallel the two. I'm going to wrap this up. Tom Brady retiring, obviously massive news. We'll get more into that in the show, but obviously he was in your division for 20 years.
Good riddance.
I mean, the best to ever do it. That will be forever a moment that will be remembered from this season. All the way down to the way that he had to retire. Thanks to Adam Schefter.
Yeah, I mean, it is madness in the end, and unfairly so. It didn't need to be done that way. But like you say, if anything, I'd be giving him the MVP just because he decided to retire. Like, it's just a perfect way to sign off. If it can't be a Super Bowl win, then an MVP, for me, retiring might be the tiebreaker between the two of them, because you could make a very good case for him or Rodgers to be the MVP. I think, if you're neutral, if you're not against Aaron Rodgers, you can make
it's not about against Aaron Rodgers. It's just that Brady led every category that counted: yards, touchdowns.
Exactly. I mean, it'd just be such a fitting end. Yeah. Like, not that he needs more awards, but don't know. It just seems right.
I agree. I'd like to see him get it. I don't think he does, but I would like to see him get there. I'm going to tap you for your Super Bowl prediction. Mine will come later in the show, although those of you that heard me live last week will know what it is, unless I've changed it, and that could happen. But who is going to be lifting the Lombardi Trophy in LA on Sunday?
It'll be the Rams.
Okay.
I think we've waited all this time for a team to play in the home Super Bowl. Obviously, your Bucks did it last year and then won it, and I think we're going to get the same again this year. To be honest, for me, it comes down to head coaching. I think McVay will outcoach. I think he will learn from what he said last time when he got beat by the Patriots that he was outcoached. And I think
we're both there.
That's it.
Zack Taylor was there. He was there on that coaching staff with McVay.
That's right. I think it's easy. I think this is his first time making the decisions. I think it's difficult, but that's just for me. It's difficult, isn't it? Let's go 28-21.
Okay, nice. Thanks for joining me. Tell everyone where they can find you and talk Dolphins or conspiracy theories or flying saucers or whatever else that people want to chat about.
Yeah, we can talk a lot of Dolphins. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
I'm a 5 Yard Lee on Twitter. You see me around 5 Yard Rush as well, obviously. But hey, let's just talk football. It's fine.
Absolutely. And stay tuned. Plenty more to come in the show. We're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. Now we've reached the part of the show where I'm going to read through some interesting stories of the tape here, I guess, for both teams when it comes to some interesting facts, some statistics, just to get you all warmed up for this Super Bowl. And then eventually we will go into some further analysis with Coach Reinbold, with Nat Coombs, and the other guests that we have on for this show. So let's start with these interesting breakdowns and statistics. So we had, for the first 54 editions of the Super Bowl, no home team had ever played in its home stadium. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers did this last year. Now the Rams are doing it again this year. This is going to be the first time in the last 7 years that there's been two number one drafted quarterbacks facing each other. And it's actually only the second time ever. So for the first 49 games in the Super Bowl, there was no two number one quarterbacks facing each other. And then Peyton Manning took on Cam Newton in Super Bowl 50. And now we've got it again with Matt Stafford and Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow taken first overall in the 2020 NFL draft. Matt Stafford first overall in the 2009 NFL draft. And that makes you feel old if you remember him being drafted. When it comes to the Bengals, they've never won the Super Bowl. They've been in the game 3 times now. This is their third appearance. The last appearance they made was in 1988, whereas the Rams did win 3 NFL championships, with the last one being in 1999 with the Greatest Show on Turf. So, it's been a while since they've won it as well, although they have been in the Super Bowl much more recently as 2018, sorry. When it comes to these two head coaches, Zack Taylor is 38, Sean McVay 36, with that combined age of 74 years and 299 days. They are the youngest combined age of opposing head coaches in Super Bowl history, and they have taken the record away from Mike Tomlin and Ken Whisenhunt that took place in 2008. Now, if McVay wins the Super Bowl on Sunday at the age of just 36 years and 20 days old, he will edge Mike Tomlin, who was 36 years and 323 days old, by being the youngest head coach to win the Super Bowl. In terms of McVay, he becomes just the 5th individual in league history to advance to 2 Super Bowls within his first 5 seasons as head coach. The other examples of that are Mike Tomlin, Jimmy Johnson who at Dallas, Joe Gibbs of Washington, and Tom Flores at Oakland and the LA Raiders. Zack Taylor, as I've mentioned a few times now, he was on that coaching staff in 2018 with the Rams. It was his last game with the Rams, and he became Bengals head coach after that. When it comes to his history in the playoffs, he has won his first 3 postseason games, and he became the third individual over the last 8 to win each of his first 4 postseason games, where he joins Doug Pederson, who did it with the Eagles, but then also with Brian Billick in 2000 with that Ravens team. This is the first time that a Super Bowl does not include at least a number 1 or number 2 seed, and it's also therefore the first Super Bowl in which both teams are seeded 4th or lower, so lowest ever seeded Super Bowl, but these teams are exciting. It doesn't necessarily matter in that way. For the 17th consecutive season, the NFL will have a new Super Bowl champion, which is extending the longest streak without a repeat winner. The last team to win consecutive Super Bowls was the 2003 and 2004 New England Patriots. Including Cincinnati on Sunday, 5 of the last 12 teams to appear in the Super Bowl missed the playoffs the previous season. That is the 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the 2019 San Francisco 49ers, 2017 Philadelphia Eagles, and 2016 Atlanta Falcons, who all reached the Super Bowl prior without making the playoffs the season before. In terms of going from worst to first, which is what the Bengals are. They're the 5th team since the year 2000 to have finished worst in their division and then come back the next year and not just win the division, but also then make the Super Bowl. 3 of the 4 prior teams that did that, the 2017 Eagles, 2009 Saints, and 2001 Patriots, won the Super Bowl. So there is some history on their side here. The other example of that was Carolina in 2003 in Super Bowl 38, who did not win that game. They lost that to the Patriots. Now, Joe Burrow here is set to make history. He'll be one of only 2 players ever in the history of the NFL, if he does win the Super Bowl, to have won the consensus college football national title and a Super Bowl, but he will also only be the first quarterback ever in history to have won both of those and the Heisman Trophy. Burrow, who was the number 1 pick, as I mentioned, the 2020 draft, is expected to become the first quarterback ever drafted first overall to start. Only 2 quarterbacks have ever won a Super Bowl in their first years with the teams. That was Trent Dilfer in the year 2000 with the Ravens, and Tom Brady, who obviously did that last year. So Matt Stafford is in line to be the 3rd person if they do win the game on Sunday. Stafford has at least 2 touchdown passes in each of the Rams' 3 postseason games. With 2 touchdown passes in the Super Bowl, he will join Pro Football Hall of Famer Kurt Warner, Joe Flacco, and Tom Brady as the only player in NFL history with at least 2 touchdown passes in 4 postseason games with the same team. That's Tom Brady from 2020, by the way. Jamar Chase is looking for another rookie record. So he holds the record for most receiving yards ever by a rookie with 1,455. He's followed that with the postseason record of 279 yards by a rookie wide receiver in his first 3 playoff games. So the only one left is to beat Torrey Holt's record for most receiving yards by a rookie in a Super Bowl. That mark is set for 109, so 110 yards above, and Jamar Chase will add another record. As for Cooper Kupp, we know he led all 3 of the major receiving categories, which was receptions, yards, and touchdowns. and he's the first player in league history to lead the NFL in those 3 categories for a team that advanced the Super Bowl. He is the 3rd player to lead the league in receiving yards and appear in the Super Bowl in the same season. That is with Jerry Rice, who did it twice in 1989, 1994, Andrew Pearson in 1977. Cup has total 25 receptions for 386 yards and 4 touchdowns during the postseason. On Sunday, he can surpass Travis Kelce, who had 31 receptions during the 2020 postseason for the most receptions in a single postseason all time, and become the second ever player to reach 500 receiving yards in a single playoff run. And that was Larry Fitzgerald in 2008 with 546. The Bengals have a +5 turnover ratio this postseason on the strength of 6 Bengals interceptions by 6 different players, including Von Bell, whose overtime interception of Patrick Mahomes set up Cincinnati's game-winning field goal for the AFC Championship game that led them to the Super Bowl. Trey Hendrickson is ranked 5th in the NFL with a career-high 14 sacks this season. He's one of 2 players with at least 13 sacks in each of the last 2 seasons. And linebacker Logan Wilson, who led the team this season with 4 interceptions, had an interception against Tennessee in the divisional round. He also led the team with 98 tackles. So a lot of things in this team point to this defense being a lot better than expected, and they've really turned up in this postseason. But then if we look at the Rams, Aaron Donald is the Associated Press Defensive Player of the Year for the 3rd time, and he's seeking his first Super Bowl victory. The Rams have been ranked 6th in rushing defense with 103.2 yards per game allowed, and ranked 3rd with 50 sacks. Donald had 12.5 sacks in the regular season, became the 4th player since 1982, when the individual sacks became an official statistic to register at least 8 sacks in each of his first 8 seasons. He also has 1.5 sacks during the 2021 playoffs. And Von Miller is making his 2nd Super Bowl appearance after registering 2.5 sacks to earn Super Bowl 50 MVP honors with Denver. Including the playoffs, Miller has a sack in 6 of his last 7 games. So quite a amazing run of results and statistics there to review. So many interesting notes in this game. So both of these teams came from behind. Bengals overcame an 18-point deficit to advance their first Super Bowl appearance since 1988. The Rams overcame a 10-point fourth quarter deficit to pass the San Francisco 49ers and make the 2nd Super Bowl in 4 seasons. Matt Stafford is ranked 2nd in the NFL with 41 touchdowns. He's ranked 3rd in passing yards, 4,886, and 6th in passer rating. Unbelievable record from him. But then also Joe Burrow has set franchise records, passing yards 4,611 and TDs at 34. He ranks 2nd in the NFL with a 108.3 passer rating. So both these guys are in sight of significant records. So the records that they are in sight of are passing yards in the postseason. Eli Manning holds that record at 1,219, followed by Kurt Warner and Joe Flacco. Matt Stafford has thrown 809 yards this postseason. Joe Burrow 842. So the record is within sight for both these players, but we need to have a heck of a game. As I mentioned, Cooper Kupp with the receptions record. He needs 6 to tie Kelce and 7 to win and pass and become the most received player in postseason history. He's also in line for the receiving yards record. He needs 160 yards to tie Larry Fitzgerald 161 to beat them. So number of things in play here for both these teams. And when we look at some of the numbers behind which can shape the numbers that can shape this game here, there's a lot of interesting statistics here. So if we look about one thing to talk about with Coach Reinbold is this ability of the Rams to get to the quarterback, and is this going to be a bit of a mismatch? In terms of the Rams, they just have this amazing ability to win at the line of scrimmage on defense. They have the best pass rush win rate, the best run stop win rate, and the best pass block win rate in the NFL. So when you're looking at what they do to predict, to get to the quarterback, but then also protect their own quarterback, have done an amazing job this season. But they are facing a quarterback in Joe Burrow who has continued to exceed expectations. So much so, he actually statistically is the most accurate quarterback in the NFL because his completion percentage is 6% over expected, which is the largest mark in the NFL this season. When we look at the defenses, we obviously are talking about the Rams, fourth in DVOA against the run and the pass. As the Bengals, as I've mentioned in the regular season, not as statistically hot, 18th in DVOA against the pass, 20th or 18th overall, 20th against the pass, 16th against the run. Obviously, not amazing statistics, but as I've mentioned earlier, they have really come to play in this postseason, and they're not to be underestimated. Rams, very potent offense, 8th ranked offense according to DVOA. The Bengals are 18th, but again, just don't necessarily worry about that because the Bengals know how to get it done in tight situations, but it's just something to keep an eye on. When it comes to explosive plays, Joe Burrow has completed 12 passes over 50 yards this season. That's a most by a QB in the last 20 years. But as I mentioned previously on another podcast, both these players are very good against the blitz. Matt Stafford better than anybody in terms of expected points against expected points added per play against the blitz, 0.64 points. That is the highest mark of any quarterback in the last 3 years, as well as also Cooper Kupp, because that's his outlet for the blitz, 636 receiving yards against the blitz, which is the most by a wide receiver in the last 15 years. But having said that, Joe Burrow is just as good against the blitz. He is 6th in expected points against the blitz. And in terms of the struggles in terms of man coverage, they don't struggle that often. Matt Stafford first against man coverage, 0.51 EPA. Burrow 0.27 EPA. That ranks Burrow 4th. That ranks Stafford 1st. The one thing about the blitz, and this is something I would not expect the Bengals to blitz too much on Sunday. So even though I've mentioned about Stafford's amazing ability to beat the blitz and score a lot of points, the Bengals were actually the 3rd lowest blitzing team in the NFL this season. So these statistics are telling you we're expecting a lot of zone coverage. It's going to be down to, will we see Lou Anarumo drop 8 more frequently and try and pick his spots and reduce Cooper Kupp to just catches over the top and screens and just limit the amount of yardage you can get? And also, how are they going to limit Odell Beckham Jr. in this? Because it's obviously a very, very difficult set of lineups. Both these teams have 3 unbelievable wide receivers that they can use. The one thing that a lot of people will be talking about is this matchup between Chase and Jalen Ramsey. Wouldn't expect this to be too frequent. I think you'll get some spots where they will try and target Ramsey, but that will be hard. I think they'll try and scheme Chase to try and go to the other side and try and get him up against the weaker corner side. But also, I think with zone, I don't think you're going to see too many instances where you're going to get a lot of one-on-one with Chase and Ramsey. So expect Chase to maybe get some double coverage, maybe Ramsey to even get some help. But also, I expect to see a lot of zone where they might let him drop deep to get a shorter yardage and avoid being beaten over the top. So again, I've been watching for the Bengals to maybe drop and get those 8 defenders back to try and limit what the Rams can do. And they did this against the Chiefs. According to Next Gen Stats, against the Chiefs, they dropped 35% of pass plays in that game against the Chiefs in the AFC title game. Mahomes went 7 of 13 for 59 yards with an interception and 2 sacks. So something to definitely keep an eye on is watching and how they adjust. And I think you'll need to see the Bengals sort of keep it close in the first half and then try and win it in the second half. One thing we'll see is definitely a lot of conservative play calling when it gets tight So both of these coaches are well renowned and well known for their conservative play calling here. So something to keep an eye on. In terms of timeouts and game management, there's been some accusations thrown at Taylor that his game management isn't the best. I think he's done pretty well in the postseason, but then he's been playing from behind quite a bit. Against McVay actually wastes the most amount of timeouts per game. Between 2018 and 2021, he wastes on average 2.9 timeouts per game, which is half of his allotment. So a wasted timeout is where they're taking a timeout either because they don't have enough men on the field, too many men on the field. They don't feel ready. They don't clock in time. They don't get to the line of scrimmage in time. The time's about to expire and they don't want to take a delay a game penalty, etc. So there is some game management pieces that we will see from McVay that could swing this. So something to keep an eye on. Both these teams don't give up too many penalties, so we're hoping not to see too many flags in this one. Both of them giving up around about 36, 37 yards in penalties per game, so not too many. In terms of turnovers, both of these teams sort of average about one turnover a game. Just slightly over 1.1, 1.2 turnovers per game. So again, something we can expect is to see a couple of turnovers is who's going to take advantage of those turnovers. And more importantly, a team's going to be able to force a second or third turnover, because I think that will be a key difference in the game. But you'd expect a turnover aside at least, because that's what these teams have given up this season. But they've also been able to create a turnover a game. So it says on paper that they are likely to balance out, that both teams will give and take away, which would make sense, a turnover every game on average. The Rams slightly better, but it's really marginal. In terms of the balance between pass and run, the Rams are more likely to give up the run a lot quicker. They actually pass 61% of the time. The Bengals tend to pass a bit more balanced, 56% of the time. How that breaks down, and I've used NFL Savant for this, is that the Rams tend to, on first down, pass 52% of the time, rush 48% of the time. So very, very even split on first down. Second down, that jumps up quite significantly, 66% on second down, 34% running on second down. So they pass quite a lot more. On third down, as you would expect, especially on those third and long situations, they pass 74% of the time and only rush 26% of the time. How that matches with the Bengals, they're more likely to rush on first down. They rush 56% of the time on first down versus 44% of the time passing. Tend to take some shots on second down. It's a 60-40 split in favor of the pass. But third down is 82% in favor of the pass, 18% just rushing. So we're likely to see through this that the Rams will probably give up the run first. The Bengals will need to establish the run and need to do this quite considerably. So let's keep an eye on that. I think if the Bengals give up the run, it could be a long afternoon, evening for them. Shout out to Kevin Huber. Kevin Huber is the punter for Cincinnati, and he's been in Cincinnati's entire, pretty much his life. He grew up in Cincy, went to high school in Cincy. He went to college in Ohio, and then he is back with Cincy. He's been on the team, I think, 12, 13 years. He's never left, and he is now in the Super Bowl. It's an amazing story. So, Kevin Huber, kudos to you, and I hope you enjoy your evening. A bit of punter love there. Time of possession is really interesting here. So the Rams have been very successful, 15-5 this season, but their time of possession is actually under 30 minutes. So they are more explosive as an offense. They don't need as much time with the ball. And this also explains why they don't manage games very well, why they can get in front and then all of a sudden teams can come back to them because they don't dominate that time of possession. I think a real key shift they'll need to make on Sunday is to try and get over 30 minutes and dominate the time of possession. If they can get themselves away from sort of this 27, 28 minutes they get now, get to that 34, 35 mark, I think they'll easily win the game. So some slightly longer drives, some more time on the ball. Don't quit the run too quickly, I think is a key piece. I think for the Bengals to win the game, they have averaged over 30 minutes time of possession. I think they're going to need to do this as well. They're going to have to, the time of possession battle is going to be really important, because we associate the Rams with this explosive, or the Bengals with this explosive offense. They fire quickly, they score quickly with these big explosive plays. And that's true. But also, if you give the Rams too much of the ball, they will just stifle this game and take it away from them. So Bengals need to dominate time of possession. They need to keep with the run, need to go on long drives, keep ticking the scoreboard over. So time of possession battle going to be really, really, really important. In terms of the Rams D, they've only given up 17 passing touchdowns this season, which is the second least in the NFL. But they have given up 18 rushing touchdowns. So they've actually given up more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns, which says, again, need to run, need to get Joe Mixon into that secondary and let him do some damage. The reason we might see the Rams give up the run much quicker is that actually the Bengals have the 5th best run defense in the NFL. So we're likely to see them potentially give it up very quickly. So there wouldn't be a surprise if we see Stafford throw this ball 35, 40 times in this Super Bowl. But I think it's really interesting to see how they try and break this down and go away from there. So a couple of other final quirky notes and statistics here. The Bengals became the first team to win each of their wildcard, divisional, and championship games by 7 points or fewer, and the third team ever since 2003 to go from first to worst to make the Super Bowl, which I've mentioned. But also, they're the 4th team ever to make the Super Bowl after recording 4 or fewer wins the previous season. That was San Francisco 2019, the Rams in 1999, and themselves, the Bengals, in 1988. Yes, that will cover everything from a sites and statistics perspective. Last thing to look for is the Super Bowl records. So these are records that could potentially be broken during the Super Bowl. I'm just going to lay these out here. So quarterback with the most passing yards is Tom Brady through 505 in Super Bowl 52 for New England. Steve Young has thrown the most passing touchdowns with 6 in Super Bowl 29. Most rushing yards was Timmy Smith of Washington in Super Bowl 22, 204. Most rushing touchdowns was Terrell Davis with 3 in Super Bowl 32 for Denver. Most receptions in the Super Bowl was James White, believe it or not, with 14 in Super Bowl 51, that incredible comeback against the Falcons. 215 receiving yards by Jerry Rice in Super Bowl 23 for the 49ers. He also has the most receiving touchdowns with 3, which he did on 2 occasions in Super Bowl 24 and also Super Bowl 29. Most sacks in the Super Bowl is 3. The last player to do that was Grady Jarrett in Super Bowl 51 with the Atlanta Falcons. That will do it. That's all the statistics and everything. Look forward to introducing you to the next segment of this show. Going to be a cracking one, as you admit. There's some statistics, there's some records to look for, and so the tail of the tape with all things statistic wise.